47 minutes. That's how long doctors fought to save her life at 4 in the morning. In her final moments of consciousness, she whispered something to the nurse holding her hand. 5 words that would break everyone who heard them. But this story doesn't start in that hospital room. It starts 2 years earlier, with a staircase, with a push, with a decision someone made to hide the truth instead of facing it. What you're about to hear is about the moments when everything could have been different, when someone could have spoken up, when someone could have made one phone call, when someone could have trusted what they were hearing through the walls at 2 in the morning. This is about the cost of silence. Jessica Wiley was the kind of woman everyone in the neighborhood knew. You'd see her at the grocery store, always waving and asking about your day. She volunteered at the church every Sunday. She organized the neighborhood watch meetings. She showed up to every parent-teacher conference with a smile on her face and homemade cookies in her hands. To the outside world, Jessica was exactly what a good mother should be: caring, involved, present. Her sons, Jasper and Casper Wiley, were twin boys, energetic and clever, the kind of kids who could charm adults without even trying. Their relatives adored them. At family gatherings, they'd help set the table without being asked. They'd play with the younger cousins. They'd say please and thank you. Extended family members would tell Jessica how lucky she was to have such well-mannered boys. If you looked at Jessica's social media, you'd see what appeared to be the perfect life. Photos of the twins at baseball games, birthday parties with elaborate cakes, family movie nights. Every post had hashtags like Blessed Mom, My Boys, and Family First. The comments section was always full of praise. You're such a great mom, Jessica. Your boys are so handsome. What a beautiful family. But behind every perfect image is a truth that nobody sees. And the truth about the Wiley family was very different from the picture Jessica painted online. Jessica was an estranged single parent. Her husband, Stephen, had left when the twins were 8 years old. Just packed his bags one day and walked out. No long explanation. No attempt to work things out. He just left. And the community had opinions about it. Some people felt sorry for Jessica. Poor thing, raising those boys alone. But others whispered different things. Some relatives quietly blamed her. Maybe if she had been different. Maybe if she had tried harder. Maybe it was her fault he left. Jessica heard these whispers. She internalized every word. Deep inside, she believed them. Maybe it was her fault. Maybe she wasn't good enough. Maybe Stephen left because she had failed as a wife, as a mother, as a woman. That shame lived inside her like a weight she couldn't put down, and it changed the way she raised her sons. Her fatal flaw was simple. She had a deep need to prove she was a good mother despite her failed marriage. She needed everyone to see that she could do this alone, that her sons would turn out fine, that she was enough. But this need created a dangerous compensation. Jessica couldn't discipline her sons. She couldn't say no to them. Every time she thought about setting boundaries, that fear crept in. What if they stop loving me? What if they leave me too, just like their father did? What if I push them away and end up alone? So she didn't push. She gave in, again and again and again, and the twins learned quickly. They learned that tears got them what they wanted. Tantrums worked. Crying in public was especially effective because Mom hated scenes. They could get new video games, later bedtimes, extra allowance, anything they asked for. All they had to do was push hard enough. Jessica would always break. When the twins turned older, they developed a new demand. They wanted a sister. It started innocently enough. They'd come home from school talking about their friends' little sisters. Everyone at school has a little sister, Mom. Why don't we have one? We want one too. At first, Jessica laughed it off. You two are enough work for me. But the boys didn't drop it. They kept bringing it up. Day after day, week after week. Then the demands escalated. The twins started throwing crying fits when Jessica said no. They'd refuse to do their homework. They'd slam doors. They'd give her the silent treatment. The tantrums became public. Jessica would be in the grocery store and the boys would start. "You don't love us enough to give us what we want. Everyone else's mom cares about them." People would stare. Jessica's face would turn red. She'd feel the judgment in their eyes. And this brings us to a decision made that changed everything. You see, Jessica's close friend was a woman named Lillian. They'd known each other for years, met at church and stayed in touch through everything. Lillian was one of the few people Jessica trusted enough to be honest with. So one afternoon, sitting in a coffee shop, Jessica confided in her friend. "The boys won't stop asking for a sister," Jessica said, stirring her coffee without drinking it. "They're making me crazy about it. I've been thinking about maybe going the sperm donor route. You know, getting pregnant again. Giving them what they want." Lillian looked at her like she'd lost her mind. "Are you serious? Jessica, pregnancy is hard. Labor is hard. Taking care of a baby is hard. You barely made it through with the twins, and that was when you had Stephen helping. Why would you put yourself through that stress again?" Jessica sighed. "I don't know. I just want them to be happy. They keep saying I don't love them enough, that I don't care about what they want." Lillian shook her head. "They're manipulating you. You know that, right?" She paused, then leaned forward. "But if you really want to give them a sister, why not consider fostering?" Jessica looked up. "Fostering?" "Yeah," Lillian said. "I did it years ago, before my divorce. It was actually a really positive experience. You'd be giving a child a home, a child who really needs one, and your boys would get the sister they want. No pregnancy, no labor, no diapers, just a kid who needs a family." The more Jessica thought about it, the more it made sense. This was the perfect solution. She could give her boys what they wanted without putting her body through pregnancy again. She could prove to everyone that she was a good mother, good enough to take in a child who needed help, good enough to expand her family, good enough to succeed where others might fail. 3 weeks later, Jessica submitted an application at a foster agency. She filled out all the paperwork, attended the orientation meetings. A social worker came to the house for a home study. The social worker interviewed Jessica. Then she interviewed the twins. And that's where things started to fall apart. During the interview, Jasper and Casper interrupted constantly. They didn't wait for their turn to speak. They showed no respect for the social worker's authority. When she asked them to wait while she finished a question, they rolled their eyes. When she asked about how they'd treat a foster sister, Casper said, "We'd treat her good, as long as she listens to us." The social worker raised an eyebrow at that comment. Then the social worker asked Jessica about her discipline methods. "How do you handle it when the boys misbehave?" Jessica became immediately defensive. "My boys don't really misbehave. They're good kids. If there's ever an issue, we talk it out. I believe in communication, not punishment." The social worker wrote something in her notes. Jessica didn't like the look on her face. 3 weeks later, Jessica received a letter. Application denied. The reason stated on paper was vague. Single parent with insufficient support system. But Jessica called and demanded more information. The real reason was in the agency's internal notes. The twins showed concerning behavioral patterns during the interview. They seemed entitled and showed poor impulse control. Jessica struggled with appropriate boundary setting. The combination raised red flags for the safety of a potential foster placement. Jessica was humiliated. How dare they judge her parenting? How dare they say her boys weren't good enough? She told the twins the agency was wrong. "They don't understand you. They don't see how special you are. We'll find somewhere else." 2 months later, Jessica applied to another foster services. This time, she prepared differently. She coached the boys on exactly what to say during the home visit. She practiced with them. Be polite. Don't interrupt. Show them you're responsible. The boys rehearsed their answers like they were preparing for a school play. The home visit seemed to go better. The boys were on their best behavior. But Harbor House did. Multiple observation periods. They came back several times over the course of a month. And eventually, the boys' true nature showed through. They got comfortable. They started interrupting again. They started pushing boundaries. The social worker saw Jessica struggle to say no when the boys demanded snacks in the middle of an interview. She saw Jessica back down when Jasper raised his voice. The social worker documented everything. The applicant struggles with saying no to her children. This is concerning for a foster placement, where firm boundaries and consistent discipline are essential for a child's well-being. Application denied after more extensive review. Jessica felt the shame all over again, but this time, the shame turned into determination. She wasn't going to let these agencies tell her she wasn't good enough. She was going to prove them wrong. 6 weeks later, Jessica applied to a third agency. This time, she presented the most polished version of her family life possible. She emphasized her church involvement, her neighborhood reputation, her financial stability. She had the boys rehearse their responses until they were perfect, and this time, it worked. The application was approved. There were minor reservations noted in the file, some concerns about boundary setting, some questions about the boys' behavior. But the foster agency was desperately short on foster families in the area. They needed placements. So they approved Jessica Wiley. A caseworker named Valencia Brooks was assigned to the family. Valencia would be responsible for checking in on whatever child was eventually placed in the home. Jessica felt vindicated. See? She was good enough. The other agencies were wrong. She could do this. Her boys deserved this. And she was going to make it work. Before we go further into the fostering story, there's something you need to know about Jasper and Casper. Something that happened when they were younger. Something that showed exactly what kind of kids they were. And something that showed exactly how Jessica responded when her sons did something wrong. When the twins were just 10 years old, they attended a decent school. The twins had been there for 2 years, and during those 2 years, multiple teachers reported concerning behavior. The boys bullied smaller children on the playground. They'd trip kids, call them names, push them around. When teachers confronted them, the boys were defiant. They'd talk back, roll their eyes, show no remorse for what they'd done. The incidents piled up, but the real breaking point came during recess one afternoon. A girl was on the swing set. She was younger than Jasper, smaller, minding her own business, swinging back and forth. Jasper walked up behind her. He grabbed the chains of the swing. He pulled it back hard. Then he shoved it forward with all his strength. The girl went flying. She lost her grip. She hit the ground hard. Her arm bent at an angle that made the playground monitor scream. The girl's arm was broken, fractured in 2 places. She needed surgery. Pins put in to hold the bone together. Her parents were furious. They demanded a meeting with the principal. They wanted answers. They wanted consequences for the boy who hurt their daughter. The principal called Jessica in for a serious meeting. She sat across from him in his office. He had witness statements from 3 students who saw what happened. He had a statement from the playground monitor who watched the whole thing. All of them said the same thing. Jasper grabbed the swing. Jasper pushed the girl. Jasper caused the injury. The principal presented all of this to Jessica. He was calm, professional. He explained that this was serious, that Jasper needed to face consequences, that they were considering suspension. Jessica's reaction was explosive. She didn't accept what they were saying. She didn't believe her son could do something like that. "My boys would never do that intentionally," she said, her voice rising. "That girl probably just fell on her own. Kids fall off swings all the time. Are you really going to blame my son for an accident?" The principal tried to explain. "Mrs. Wiley, we have multiple witnesses. This wasn't an accident. Jasper deliberately pushed her." "Are you calling my children liars?" Jessica stood up, her face red. "This is discrimination. You're targeting my boys because I'm a single mother, because you think I can't control them. But you're wrong. My boys are good kids, and I won't let you punish them for something they didn't do." The principal tried to remain calm. "Mrs. Wiley, please sit down. Let's discuss this rationally." But Jessica was beyond rational. She demanded a meeting with the superintendent. She threatened legal action. She made such a scene that other staff members in nearby offices could hear her yelling through the walls. She accused the school of bias, of unfair treatment, of making her sons scapegoats. The principal finally gave up. "Mrs. Wiley, if that's how you feel, then perhaps this school isn't the right fit for your family." Jessica took that as her cue. Within a week, she pulled both twins from the school mid-year. She enrolled them in a different school across town. It was far enough away that none of the teachers there would know about the incident. The boys would have a clean slate, a fresh start. When Jessica filled out the enrollment paperwork, she wrote that they were transferring because they wanted better opportunities. She didn't mention the broken arm, the bullying reports, the behavioral concerns. The new school had no idea what kind of students they were getting. The staff at the twins' former school were honestly relieved to see Jasper and Casper go, but they worried about what would happen at the next school. Because the problem wasn't the environment. The problem was the boys themselves, and the mother who refused to hold them accountable. This incident established a pattern that would repeat itself over and over. When confronted with her son's behavior, Jessica didn't address the problem. She didn't make them take responsibility. She didn't teach them that actions have consequences. Instead, she removed them from the situation. She blamed everyone else. She protected her boys at all costs, even when they were clearly in the wrong. Months passed after Jessica got approved for fostering. The twins were now 13 years old. Jessica had been looking through profiles of available foster children for months. She was particular about what she wanted. She wanted a young girl specifically. Someone the boys could feel protective of. Someone who would look up to them. Someone who would make them feel important. That's when she saw Matilda's profile. 11 years old. Energetic. The case notes said she loved running and dancing. She was full of life. She'd been in the foster system since she was 3 years old. She'd bounced through 3 different homes, never stayed anywhere long enough to feel permanent. But her caseworker wrote that she had a resilient spirit. She adapted well to new situations. She deserved a stable home. Jessica requested a respite placement first. A trial run. Just a weekend. See how everyone got along before making any big decisions. The agency agreed. Matilda was brought to the Wiley house on a Friday afternoon. When Matilda walked through the front door, the twins were genuinely excited. After years of asking and waiting, they finally had their sister, even if it was just for the weekend. Matilda was shy at first, quiet. She looked around the house like she was trying to memorize every detail, trying to figure out if this might be the place she'd finally get to stay. That first evening went well. Jessica made dinner. They all sat at the table together. The boys asked Matilda questions about school, about her hobbies, about what music she liked. She opened up slowly, started smiling more, started laughing at Casper's jokes. By bedtime, she seemed comfortable. Saturday morning, Matilda was up early. She loved being active. She loved moving. The boys suggested they all play together. Jessica was in the kitchen cleaning up from breakfast when she heard laughing from the living room. The sound made her smile. This was working. This was exactly what she'd hoped for. But then the laughter changed. It got louder, more chaotic. Jessica walked toward the living room. She saw Matilda and Jasper running up and down the staircase. They were chasing each other, playing tag, the kind of rough play that kids do without thinking about danger. Matilda was fast. She was giggling. Jasper was right behind her. They reached the top of the stairs. Matilda spun around to run back down, but Jasper was too close. He reached out during the game, his hands connected with her back. He pushed, not with malice, not because he hated her, just careless force. The kind of thoughtless push that comes from a teenage boy who doesn't understand his own strength. Matilda's body went backward. Her feet left the ground. She tumbled down 12 wooden steps. Her small body bounced twice. Her head hit the railing. Her spine hit the edge of a step. The sound her body made when it hit the bottom was a sound Jessica would never forget. A crack, a thud, and then silence. Casper stood frozen at the top of the stairs, his mouth open, his face white. Jasper started crying immediately. "I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to. It was an accident." Jessica appeared within seconds. She saw Matilda at the bottom of the stairs, not moving, eyes closed, a small puddle of blood forming under her head. Jessica's hands shook as she dialed 911. "My foster daughter fell down the stairs. She's not moving. Please hurry. Please." The operator stayed on the line, asked questions, told Jessica not to move Matilda. The ambulance arrived 7 minutes later. Paramedics rushed in. They stabilized Matilda's neck, put her on a backboard, loaded her into the ambulance. Jessica rode with her. The twins stayed home with a neighbor. At the hospital, doctors ran tests, CT scans, MRIs, X-rays. Jessica sat in the waiting room for hours. She called the caseworker. She explained what happened. "It was an accident. They were just playing. I don't know how this happened." The caseworker said she'd come to the hospital as soon as possible. Finally, a doctor came out. His face was serious. He asked Jessica to sit down. "Mrs. Wiley, Matilda has sustained a severe spinal cord injury. The T12 to L1 vertebrae are completely severed. We've done everything we can, but the damage is permanent." Jessica stared at him. She didn't understand. "What does that mean?" The doctor took a breath. "It means she will never walk again." The words didn't make sense. Jessica kept waiting for him to say something else. To say they could fix it. To say there was surgery or therapy or something that would help. But the doctor just looked at her with sad eyes. "I'm sorry. There's nothing we can do. She'll need a wheelchair for the rest of her life." 3 days later, Matilda woke up in the hospital. She was groggy from the medications, confused about where she was. She looked around the room, saw the machines, saw Jessica sitting in a chair beside the bed. "Miss Jessica?" Her voice was small, scared. "When can I go back to dance class?" Jessica's throat tightened. She couldn't speak. The doctor came in. He explained to Matilda what happened. He used gentle words, but the truth was brutal, no matter how he said it. Matilda's legs didn't work anymore. She wouldn't be able to dance. She wouldn't be able to run. She wouldn't be able to walk. Matilda's face crumpled. Tears ran down her cheeks. She kept saying no, over and over. "No, no, no. Please, no." Jessica reached for her hand, but Matilda pulled away. She turned her face toward the wall, and she cried. The caseworker arrived to assess the situation. She needed to determine if the placement could continue, or if Matilda needed to be moved somewhere else. Jessica immediately went into damage control mode. She explained it exactly the way she'd been rehearsing in her head. It was a tragic accident during play. The kids were running around. Matilda fell. No one's fault. Just a terrible, terrible accident. The caseworker asked Jasper what happened. Jasper, with tears still in his eyes, said the same thing. "We were playing tag. She fell. I didn't touch her." Jessica had coached him. Not directly. Not with words. But with the way she talked about it. With the way she presented the story. Jasper understood what version he was supposed to tell. Jessica went to Matilda's hospital room when she was alone. She sat beside the bed. She spoke softly, gently. "Sweetheart, I know this is scary. I know you're hurting. But you fell while playing. These things happen. It's nobody's fault. Just a really unlucky accident." Matilda, exhausted and overwhelmed, just nodded. She didn't have the energy to argue. She didn't have the strength to say what really happened. She just wanted someone to make it stop hurting. But here's the critical detail Jessica left out of every single retelling of that day. She never mentioned that Jasper pushed Matilda. She never said his hands connected with her back. She never acknowledged that this wasn't just a fall. It was caused by her son. By his careless, thoughtless action. Jessica buried that truth. She rewrote the story in her mind until she almost believed it herself. And to Jasper, when they were alone in the car on the way home from the hospital one day, she said the words that would shape everything that came after. "Baby, you didn't mean it. Accidents happen. Don't blame yourself. This wasn't your fault. Jessica couldn't sleep for months after the accident. She'd close her eyes and see Matilda tumbling down those stairs. She'd hear that crack. She'd see the blood. The guilt ate at her. But there was something else mixed in with the guilt. Fear. If the truth came out, if people knew Jasper had pushed her, Jessica would lose her fostering approval. There might be legal consequences. People would judge her, blame her, say she was a bad mother, say her sons were violent. Everything she'd worked to prove about herself would crumble. So she made a decision. She would fix this. She would make it right, not by telling the truth, but by adopting Matilda, by making her part of the family permanently, by taking care of her for the rest of her life. That would prove Jessica was a good person, a good mother, someone who took responsibility. When Jessica told the twins about her plan to adopt Matilda, they cried with joy. "We're getting our sister. We're so sorry this happened to her, Mom. We'll take such good care of her, we promise." And they meant it. In that moment, they genuinely meant it. The caseworkers saw the adoption as redemptive. Here was a family taking extraordinary responsibility for a child who'd been injured in their care. They saw Jessica as selfless, caring, going above and beyond. What no one recognized was that Jessica wasn't doing this to protect Matilda. She was doing this to absolve her own guilt, to protect her reputation, to maintain the image of the perfect mother who could handle anything. 8 months after the accident, the adoption was finalized. Matilda officially became Matilda Wiley. She was legally bound to the family that had destroyed her mobility, the family whose son had pushed her down those stairs, the family whose mother had buried the truth to save herself. The first year after Matilda's adoption was different from what came later. For those 12 months, the twins were genuinely caring. They helped Matilda with everything she needed. When she had to transfer from her wheelchair to the couch, they'd be there to support her weight. When she needed something from a high shelf, they'd get it without complaining. They pushed her wheelchair gently through the house, careful not to bump into furniture or go too fast. Jasper was especially remorseful during this time. He seemed to carry the weight of what happened on those stairs, even though his mother kept telling him it wasn't his fault. He'd apologize for small things that didn't need apologies. If Matilda dropped something and he picked it up, he'd say sorry like it was his responsibility that she'd dropped it in the first place. He'd check on her multiple times throughout the day. "Do you need anything? Are you comfortable? Can I get you water?" Casper took a different approach, but it was caring in its own way. He tried to make Matilda laugh. He'd tell jokes at dinner. He'd do silly impressions of their teachers. When he got his allowance, he'd buy her small gifts. A magazine about dance that he found at the store. A bracelet she'd mentioned liking when they passed a shop. A candy bar she said was her favorite. These weren't expensive things, but they showed he was thinking about her. The twins included her in everything they did. When they went to the movies, Matilda came along. They'd help her into the theater, make sure she had a good spot where she could see the screen. When they played video games in their room, they'd bring an extra controller for her. They'd set up the game so she could play from her wheelchair. They made her feel like part of the family, like she belonged. Jessica watched all of this with pride. She praised them constantly. Every single day she'd tell them how wonderful they were. "You boys are such good brothers. You're heroes. Not every kid would be this caring. I'm so proud of you." The praise felt good. It made the twins feel important. Special. Like they were doing something meaningful. And for a while, observers might even have forgiven what happened on those stairs. They might have forgiven Jasper's careless push. They might have forgiven Jessica for concealing the full truth. Because it really did seem like the family was healing together. Like they were making the best of a terrible situation. Like love and care were winning out over tragedy. But around 18 months after the adoption, small changes began. They were subtle at first, easy to miss if you weren't paying close attention. The boys became less enthusiastic about helping Matilda. They still did what needed to be done, but it felt different. Tasks that used to be acts of care started feeling like obligations, like chores they had to complete. When Matilda asked for help reaching something, there'd be a small sigh before one of them got up. When she needed to be transferred from her wheelchair, there'd be a moment of hesitation. A look exchanged between the twins that said, "Whose turn is it?" The gentleness started to fade. They'd push her wheelchair a bit faster than necessary. They'd be less careful about bumping into things. Matilda noticed the shift. Of course she did. But she didn't say anything. She didn't want to seem ungrateful. She didn't want to cause problems. She had a family now. A real family. She had a mom and brothers. She had a home. She'd been in the foster system since she was 3 years old. She knew how rare this was, how lucky she was to have been adopted. So she stayed quiet about the changes. She told herself it was normal, that families had ups and downs, that the boys were just getting used to the routine. But deep down, she could feel something shifting. The warmth that had surrounded her during that first year was starting to cool, and she had no idea just how cold things were about to become. Before we go further into what happened in that house, you need to understand who Matilda really was, where she came from, what her life looked like before the Wileys, because her story didn't start with that staircase. It started much earlier, with trauma that wasn't her fault, with decisions made by people trying to do their best in impossible situations. Matilda's biological mother was 19 years old when she was raped. The attack happened late one night when she was walking home from her job at a grocery store. A man grabbed her, dragged her into an alley, did things to her that no one should ever experience. She reported it to the police, but the man was never caught, never identified, never held accountable for what he did. 2 months later, she discovered she was pregnant. The pregnancy was a daily reminder of the worst night of her life. She tried to cope, she really did. But she was barely more than a child herself. She had no support system, no partner, no money. And every time she looked in the mirror and saw her growing belly, she relived that night all over again. When Matilda was born, her mother tried to bond with her. She held her, fed her, changed her diapers. But the connection never came. Every time she looked at Matilda's face, she saw her rapist. She knew it wasn't the baby's fault. She knew Matilda was innocent. But trauma doesn't care about logic. Trauma doesn't care about what's fair. By the time Matilda was 3 years old, her mother was barely functioning. She'd stopped leaving the house except when absolutely necessary. She'd stopped sleeping. She'd cry for hours at a time. Matilda's grandmother watched her daughter fall apart and realized something had to be done. This young woman couldn't take care of herself, let alone a child. And Matilda deserved better than growing up in a home filled with that much pain. So Matilda's grandmother made a heartbreaking decision. She took 3-year-old Matilda to the foster system. She signed the papers to relinquish custody. The foster agency file notes from that day are brief but devastating. Mother unable to care for child due to trauma from assault. Grandmother relinquishing custody. Child is healthy, developmentally on track, deserves stable home environment. Matilda's grandmother told herself she was protecting Matilda, that giving her to the system would give her a chance at a normal life, a life without the weight of her mother's trauma crushing her. She cried the whole drive home from the foster agency, and she spent the rest of her life wondering if she'd made the right choice. Matilda didn't understand what was happening that day. She was only 3. All she knew was that her grandmother had taken her somewhere and then left her there with strangers. She cried for hours. She kept asking when Grandma was coming back. The foster workers tried to comfort her, but she was inconsolable. Eventually, she exhausted herself and fell asleep. For the next 8 years, Matilda bounced through the foster system. She went to 3 different homes before she turned 11. The first family had her for 2 years. They were kind enough, but they were fostering multiple children and didn't have the emotional capacity to give each kid the attention they needed. Matilda got lost in the shuffle. When the family moved to another state for a job opportunity, Matilda wasn't invited to come along. The second home lasted 18 months. This family wanted to adopt, but they wanted an infant. They were using foster care as a way to get matched with a baby. When they finally got their infant, Matilda was moved out to make room. She packed her few belongings into a trash bag and said goodbye to another temporary family. The third home was only supposed to be short-term, a respite placement while they found somewhere more permanent. but it stretched into a year because the system was overwhelmed and understaffed. Matilda never felt settled there. She knew it was temporary. She knew not to get attached. And she was right. When a permanent placement opened up, she was moved again. Through all of this, Matilda remained optimistic. Years passed after Matilda's adoption. The twins were now 17 years old. Matilda was 15. The twins hit puberty around age 15 or 16. Their bodies changed. Their voices got deeper. Hair grew in new places, and along with these physical changes came rising sexual urges, natural curiosity about sex, thoughts they'd never had before, feelings they didn't fully understand. But Jessica never provided proper guidance. She never had conversations with them about healthy sexuality, about consent, about respecting others, about appropriate behavior. She was too uncomfortable to have those talks. So the twins learned about sex from other sources, from whispers in the school hallway, from jokes their friends made. And then one day at school, a friend showed them pornography on his phone. The twins were fascinated. They'd never seen anything like it before. The explicit images, the sounds, the acts being performed. It felt forbidden, exciting, thrilling. They started finding ways to watch more. They'd borrow their friend's phone during lunch and watch videos in the bathroom. They'd stay up late when Jessica was asleep and search for it on the family computer. They'd watch in their room with the door locked, keeping the volume low so their mother wouldn't hear. The pornography became a regular part of their lives, and it shaped the way they thought about sex. It taught them that sex was about power, about taking what you want, about women being objects to use for pleasure. As their sexual curiosity intensified, their desire to experiment grew. Both twins had girlfriends at school. Pretty girls, popular girls. Girls who liked them because they were charming and funny and good-looking. But the twins knew better than to pressure these girls. They'd heard stories about guys who pushed too hard and ended up in trouble. "We could get in trouble," Jasper said to Casper one day. "Her parents would call the cops if we did anything she didn't want." "She'd tell everyone at school," Casper agreed. "We'd be known as those guys. No thanks." But the desire to experiment didn't go away. It grew stronger, more insistent. They'd lie in bed at night thinking about it, wishing they had an outlet, wishing they could try the things they'd seen in those videos. And then one afternoon, sitting in their room, Casper said something that changed everything. "What about Matilda?" Jasper looked at his brother like he was crazy. "What? No, that's our sister." "Is she, though?" Casper said. His voice was calm, casual, like he was discussing what to have for dinner. "She's not really our sister. She's just some foster kid Mom adopted. And think about it. She can't go anywhere. She can't run away. She can't tell anyone who'd believe her over us." Jasper stared at his brother. The idea was wrong. He knew it was wrong. But Casper kept talking. "Mom won't do anything anyway. She never does. Even if Matilda said something, Mom would take our side. She always does. And everyone else? They think we're these amazing brothers taking care of our disabled sister. Who's going to believe her?" Jasper was quiet for a long moment. And then, in a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "You're right. Mom won't do anything." That conversation marked the moment when the twins stopped seeing Matilda as a person. They stopped seeing her as their sister. They stopped seeing her as someone deserving of respect and protection. Instead, they saw her as an opportunity, as someone available, powerless, and convenient. Someone they could use without facing consequences. The entitlement they'd felt about having to care for her merged with their sexual curiosity and twisted into something vile. They began to plan, not explicitly, not with detailed discussions, but they both understood what was about to happen. They both knew the line they were about to cross, and neither of them stopped the other. Before the sexual abuse began, they started with smaller cruelties, testing the waters, seeing what they could get away with. They'd forget to help Matilda to the bathroom when she asked. She'd be left sitting in her wheelchair, uncomfortable, until she had no choice but to soil herself. Then they'd mock her, "Really, Matilda? You couldn't hold it? That's disgusting." She'd cry from the humiliation, and they'd laugh. They'd push her wheelchair too fast down ramps, ignoring her screams to slow down. They'd brake suddenly at the bottom, jerking her forward in the chair. "What's wrong? Don't you like roller coasters?" They thought it was funny. They thought her fear was entertaining. They started hiding her medications. Matilda took pain medication for nerve pain related to her spinal injury. When the boys hid her pills, she'd be in agony. She'd beg them to help her find the medication. "Please, it hurts so much. Please." They'd watch her suffer for a while before finding the pills and giving them back. They took her phone away, just walked into her room one day and took it. "You don't need this." "Who are you going to call anyway?" Matilda protested. She needed her phone to call for help if something happened, to stay in touch with her caseworker, to talk to friends from school. But the twins didn't care. They blocked her access to the computer too. She was completely isolated from the outside world, unable to reach out for help, unable to tell anyone what was happening. During one of Valencia's routine visits, Matilda tried to say something. The caseworker asked how things were going, and Matilda hesitated. "Sometimes they're not very nice to me," she said quietly. Valencia wrote it down in her notes. She asked Matilda to elaborate, but the twins were in the next room. Matilda could hear them. She knew they'd hear whatever she said, so she backed down. "It's nothing. Just normal sibling stuff." Valencia made a note in the file. "Foster child reports occasional sibling conflict. Mother states this is typical teenage behavior and nothing to be concerned about." The note was filed away. The visit ended. And Matilda was left alone with the twins, who were now angry that she'd said anything at all. The abuse escalated from psychological to physical. The twins were no longer content with just tormenting her emotionally. They wanted to hurt her. They wanted to exert power over her in more direct ways, and they knew she couldn't fight back, couldn't run, couldn't defend herself. Bruises started appearing on Matilda's arms, dark purple marks where the twins had gripped her too hard during transfers. They'd grab her roughly, their fingers digging into her skin, lifting her from the wheelchair with more force than necessary. If she cried out in pain, they'd tell her to stop being dramatic. "We're helping you. You should be grateful." One afternoon, Casper was heating water for tea. Matilda was in the kitchen, waiting for her lunch. Casper walked past her with the pot of boiling water, and then he accidentally spilled it on her legs. Matilda screamed. The water burned her skin, but because of her spinal injury, she couldn't feel it right away. By the time the pain registered, the damage was done. Second-degree burns on both legs. Jessica wasn't home when it happened. She was at work. When she came home and saw the burns, she asked what happened. "It was an accident," Casper said. "I tripped. The pot spilled. I'm so sorry, Matilda." Matilda sat there in shock, tears streaming down her face, but she didn't contradict him. What would be the point? Jessica would believe Casper anyway. She always did. Another time, Casper locked Matilda in the closet as punishment for complaining. She'd told Jessica that morning that the boys were being mean to her. Jessica had brushed it off. "They're teenagers, honey. Teenagers can be moody. It's not personal." But Casper had heard her complain, and he was angry. After Jessica left for work, he wheeled Matilda to the hall closet, transferred her out of the wheelchair, and left her on the floor inside. Then he closed the door and locked it. Matilda screamed for 6 hours. Her voice went hoarse from screaming. She pounded on the door with her fists until her hands hurt. She cried until she had no tears left. No one came. Jessica was at work. Jasper was upstairs with headphones on, ignoring the noise. And Casper was watching TV in the living room, completely unbothered. When Jessica came home that evening, she heard muffled sounds from the closet. She opened the door and found Matilda on the floor, dehydrated and exhausted. "What happened? Why are you in here?" Matilda couldn't even speak. She just sobbed. The twins appeared in the hallway. "We were playing hide and seek," Casper said. "She wanted to hide in there. We forgot she was in there. Sorry." Jessica helped Matilda back into her wheelchair. She gave her water. She put her to bed. But she didn't question the twins' story. She didn't investigate further. She chose to believe it was an innocent mistake, because believing anything else would mean facing something she didn't want to face. The abuse took its darkest turn. It was late at night. Jessica was asleep in her room down the hall. Matilda was in her bed, trying to sleep, despite the constant anxiety that had become her normal state. And then her bedroom door opened. Casper stepped inside and closed the door quietly behind him. It was 2 a.m. The house was silent. Matilda's heart started racing. "What are you doing?" she whispered. Casper didn't answer. He walked to her bed. Matilda tried to scream, but he moved fast. His hand covered her mouth. "Don't," he said. His voice was cold, emotionless. "Who's going to believe you? You're just the crippled foster kid. Mom won't believe you. She loves us more than you. And if you tell anyone, we'll make your life even worse." What happened next lasted for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Matilda couldn't fight him off. Her upper body had strength, but she couldn't use her legs to kick, couldn't run, couldn't escape. She was trapped in her own body, trapped in that bed, trapped under him. When it was over, Casper left the room like nothing had happened. Matilda lay there in shock, staring at the ceiling, trying to process what had just happened to her. 3 weeks later, it happened again. But this time it was Jasper. He came into her room late at night. He didn't say much. He just did what he wanted and left. The twins hadn't coordinated. They hadn't planned it together. But they'd both independently reached the same vile conclusion. That Matilda was theirs to use. That they could do whatever they wanted to her. That there would be no consequences. And they were right. Because Jessica knew what was happening. She heard things. She saw things. She chose to ignore all of it. Jessica heard movement in the house late at night on multiple occasions. She'd wake up to use the bathroom and hear footsteps in the hallway, hear a door closing. She'd lie in bed wondering what the boys were doing up so late. But she never got up to check. She never investigated. She heard Matilda's muffled crying through the walls. The sound would wake her sometimes. She'd lie there in the dark, listening to those sobs, and she'd tell herself Matilda was probably having a nightmare. That teenagers cried sometimes, that it wasn't anything serious. One night, Jessica woke up around 2:30 in the morning. She got up to get water from the kitchen. On the way back to her room, she walked past Matilda's bedroom. The door was closing quickly. She saw movement inside. She heard Matilda sobbing. Jessica stopped in the hallway. She stood there for a full minute. Her hand on the doorknob. She could open it. She could walk in. She could check on Matilda. She could see what was happening. But then she thought about what she might find. She thought about what it would mean if one of her sons was in there doing something he shouldn't be doing. She thought about the consequences, the police, the arrests, the public shame, the complete destruction of everything she'd worked to build, the final proof that she'd failed as a mother. So, Jessica turned around. She walked back to her own room. She closed her door. She turned on the TV to drown out the sounds from down the hall. And she made the choice to do nothing. Why did Jessica choose silence? Because confronting what was happening would mean admitting what her sons had become. It would mean admitting she had failed as a mother. It would mean potentially losing her boys to the criminal justice system. It would mean facing her own culpability in creating these monsters. Her entire identity was wrapped up in being a good mom despite her divorce, despite raising boys alone. If she acknowledged the abuse, that entire image would collapse. If her sons went to jail, everyone would know she had failed. The shame of her divorce would be nothing compared to the shame of this. So Jessica chose her reputation and her sons over Matilda's safety. Every single night she heard crying and did nothing, she made that choice again. Every time she saw bruises and accepted whatever explanation the twins gave, she made that choice. Every time Matilda seemed more withdrawn and scared and Jessica did nothing, she made that choice. The abuse continued. The twins became bolder as time went on, more frequent. Sometimes both of them would assault Matilda on the same night. Sometimes they'd go days without bothering her, and she'd start to hope it was over. but it was never over. Matilda stopped crying out loud. She learned it brought no help. No one was coming to save her. So she stayed silent during the assaults. She'd stare at the ceiling and leave her body mentally. She'd pretend she was somewhere else. Someone else. She'd dissociate until it was over. The twins noticed her detachment, and it made them angrier. They wanted a reaction. They wanted to see fear or pain or something. But Matilda had learned to give them nothing. So the violence escalated. They hurt her more, trying to get the response they wanted, trying to break through the wall she'd built around herself. And through it all, Jessica slept down the hall, pretending she didn't know, pretending everything was fine. While all of this was happening inside the Wiley house, people on the outside were seeing signs. Small things. Red flags that didn't seem significant on their own, but added up to a picture of a child in distress. The problem was that these people saw the signs, but didn't connect them, didn't push hard enough, didn't trust their instincts over Jessica's explanations. At school, the nurse, Mrs. Deshawn Hartley, noticed changes in Matilda. Mrs. Hartley had been a school nurse for 15 years. She'd seen abuse before. She knew the signs. During a routine check to take Matilda's blood pressure, she wrapped the cuff around Matilda's arm. As soon as she started inflating it, Matilda flinched and pulled away sharply. "Honey, I'm sorry. Did that hurt?" Mrs. Hartley asked. Matilda shook her head, but wouldn't make eye contact. Mrs. Hartley noticed other things too. Matilda had lost weight. She seemed jumpy and nervous. She avoided being touched. "Matilda, are you okay at home? You seem scared. Is everything all right?" Mrs. Hartley asked gently. Matilda's eyes filled with tears. For a moment, Mrs. Hartley thought she was going to say something, but then Matilda blinked the tears away and shook her head. "I'm fine. Just tired." Mrs. Hartley documented her concerns in Matilda's file. She flagged it for the counselor to follow up. Ms. Rhonda Clement was Matilda's English teacher. She'd taught Matilda for 2 years and had watched her change dramatically. When Matilda first started at the school, she was chatty. She participated in class discussions. She'd raise her hand to answer questions. She'd smile and joke with other students. But over the past year, all of that had disappeared. Now Matilda barely spoke in class. She kept her head down. She avoided eye contact with everyone. She sat in the back of the room and tried to be invisible. Ms. Clement reached out to her after class one day. "Matilda, is everything all right? You seem different. You used to love participating, and now you barely speak. Has something happened?" Matilda forced a smile. "I'm just tired, Ms. Clement. Taking care of myself is hard sometimes. The wheelchair makes everything more difficult." Ms. Clement accepted the explanation, but remained concerned. She mentioned it to other teachers, but no one knew what to do. The guidance counselor flagged Matilda for what he called depressive symptoms. She was withdrawn. Her grades were dropping. She seemed hopeless. The counselor called Jessica to discuss the possibility of outside therapy. "Mrs. Wiley, I think Matilda would really benefit from seeing a therapist. She's showing signs of depression, and I think professional support would help." Jessica's response was immediate and firm. "That's not necessary. She's just adjusting to being a teenager. It's hard for any girl that age, and the wheelchair makes everything harder emotionally. This is normal. She'll be fine." The counselor pushed back. "I really do think professional support would help, Mrs. Wiley. Depression isn't something that just goes away on its own." Jessica's voice took on an edge. "I said I'll think about it. Thank you for your concern." She never called back. She never scheduled therapy. And the counselor's hands were tied without parental cooperation. Valencia Brooks, the caseworker assigned to the Wiley family, visited every other month. Valencia was 28 years old. She specialized in cases involving disabled foster children. She'd been doing this work for 6 years. She'd seen abuse cases before. She knew the signs. And during her visits to the Wiley home, she was seeing more and more signs that something was wrong. During one routine home check, Valencia noticed that Matilda avoided eye contact completely. She wouldn't look at Valencia when she spoke. She kept her eyes on the floor. When the twins walked into the room, Matilda's whole body, tensed. She started trembling visibly. Her hands gripped the armrests of her wheelchair until her knuckles turned white. Valencia asked to speak with Matilda privately. They went into Matilda's room and closed the door. "Matilda, I need you to be honest with me. Are you safe here? Is anyone hurting you?" Valencia asked. Matilda's eyes filled with tears, but she shook her head. "Everything's fine. They're good brothers. They take good care of me." But her body language told a different story. Her arms were wrapped around herself protectively. She was rocking slightly back and forth. Her voice was flat and emotionless. Valencia knew something was wrong. Her instincts were screaming at her. But Matilda was denying any abuse. Valencia had no concrete evidence, no visible injuries that day, no disclosure, nothing she could act on. After speaking with Matilda, Valencia pulled Jessica aside. "Mrs. Wiley, I think Matilda might be experiencing some distress in the home. She seems very anxious. I'm concerned about her emotional well-being." Jessica's response was perfectly rehearsed. She'd had this conversation before with the school counselor. She knew exactly what to say. "Matilda is very emotional. Puberty is hard for any girl, and it's especially hard for her because of the wheelchair. Everything is more difficult when you can't walk. She gets frustrated easily. The boys are typical teenagers. Sometimes they tease each other. Sometimes they bicker. But it's all normal sibling stuff. Nothing to be concerned about." Jessica's tone was confident, calm, reasonable. She looked Valencia in the eye when she spoke. There wasn't a hint of deception in her voice. "She also bruises very easily because of circulation issues related to her spinal injury," Jessica added. "Sometimes I see bruises on her and I ask her about them, and she says she just bumped into something or someone accidentally grabbed her too hard during a transfer. It's part of living with her condition." Every explanation was plausible. Every explanation made sense. Jessica had an answer for everything. Valencia's instinct told her something was wrong, but she had no concrete evidence, no visible injuries that day that couldn't be explained by circulation issues or accidental bumps. Matilda had denied any abuse when asked directly, and Jessica seemed capable and caring. Valencia's supervisor would ask for proof before removing a child from a home. "Without disclosure or clear physical evidence, we can't remove her," the supervisor said when Valencia brought her concerns to the office. "The mother seems capable. The home is clean. The child is fed and attending school. We need more than instinct." So Valencia documented her concerns in the file. She made notes about Matilda's body language, her anxiety, the way she reacted to the twins, but she couldn't act, not without more proof, not without Matilda telling her what was really happening, and Matilda wasn't going to tell. She knew what would happen if she did. The twins had made it clear. No one would believe her, and they'd make her life even worse. All of these people saw pieces of the puzzle. The nurse saw the flinching. The teacher saw the withdrawal. The counselor saw the depression. The caseworker saw the fear. But no one put the pieces together. No one pushed hard enough. No one trusted their instincts over Jessica's confident explanations. And so, Matilda remained trapped in that house, suffering in silence, waiting for someone to save her. But no one came. Spring arrived when Matilda noticed something was wrong when she missed her period. At first, she thought maybe it was stress. Maybe her body was reacting to everything she'd been through. She waited, and then she missed her second month. That's when the panic really set in. Matilda didn't fully understand how this could happen. She had limited sexual education. The school had taught basic biology, but nothing that prepared her for this reality. She had no privacy to research what was happening to her. The twins had taken her phone months ago. She had no access to the computer. She couldn't look up information. She couldn't reach out for help. She was completely isolated. She started feeling nauseous in the mornings. She'd wake up and her stomach would turn. She'd feel like she was going to be sick. Her breasts became tender, sore to the touch. Her body was changing in ways she couldn't control. And she knew what it meant. She was pregnant. 3 months passed before the physical signs became obvious enough that she couldn't hide them anymore. Matilda was terrified. She lay in bed at night staring at the ceiling, trying to comprehend what was happening to her. She knew she was pregnant, but she couldn't figure out how to handle it. Who could she tell? The twins had made it clear that no one would believe her. Jessica had proven she wouldn't protect her. The caseworker hadn't believed her subtle hints before. Where could she go? She was in a wheelchair. She couldn't just run away. She couldn't escape. She started wearing baggier clothes, oversized sweatshirts that hung loose on her frame, anything to hide the curve of her stomach that was starting to show. She looked at herself in the mirror and felt sick. This thing growing inside her was a reminder of everything they'd done to her, everything she couldn't stop, everything she couldn't escape. Matilda made a desperate decision. She stopped eating. She thought if she could just keep her stomach flat, maybe no one would notice. Maybe she could hide it long enough to figure out what to do. But not eating made all the symptoms worse. The nausea got more intense. She felt weak all the time. Dizzy. But she kept doing it because she didn't know what else to do. One afternoon, Jessica was doing laundry. It was a routine day. Nothing special. She went into Matilda's room to collect the dirty clothes from the hamper. She picked up one of Matilda's shirts, and that's when she saw it. The unmistakable curve of Matilda's stomach. Even through the baggy clothes, it was visible now. Jessica's hands started shaking. She walked to Matilda's bed where Matilda was lying down. "Are you pregnant?" Jessica's voice was sharp, accusatory. Matilda's face crumpled immediately. She broke down sobbing, uncontrollable tears. She couldn't form words. She just cried and cried. Jessica's voice got louder. "How did this happen? Who did this to you?" She was standing over Matilda now, demanding answers. Matilda could barely breathe through the sobs. "Please don't be mad. Please don't send me away. Please." Those were the only words she could get out. She was begging, pleading, terrified that Jessica would kick her out, that she'd be sent back into the system, that she'd lose even this broken, horrible version of a family. Jessica's face went white. She stood there frozen. And in that moment, she knew. She suspected immediately who had done this. Her sons, her boys. But she couldn't admit it, not out loud, not even to herself, because admitting it would mean facing something she couldn't face. That evening, Jessica called Jasper and Casper into the living room. They walked in casually, not knowing what was coming. Jessica's voice was tight, controlled. "Did you touch your sister? Tell me the truth right now." The twins looked at each other, then back at their mother. "What? No! That's disgusting," Casper said. His voice was loud, defensive. Jasper nodded. "Yeah, Mom, what are you talking about?" Jessica pressed harder. "She's pregnant. Someone did this to her. Was it you?" There was a long pause, the kind of pause that said everything. Jasper finally spoke. His voice was quieter now. "She wanted it. She was lonely. She asked us." Casper nodded quickly. "Yeah, she wanted attention. We felt sorry for her." Jessica sat down on the couch. She didn't speak for 5 full minutes. She just sat there, her hands in her lap, staring at nothing. The twins stood there waiting for her to say something, to yell, to cry, to do something. But she just sat. And then finally she looked up at them. "This can't get out. Do you understand? This can't get out." That was her response. Not anger at what they'd done. Not horror at the violation. Not protection for Matilda. Just fear. Fear that people would find out. Fear that her reputation would be destroyed. Fear that everyone would know she'd failed. Jessica's immediate priority became hiding the pregnancy at all costs. She canceled Matilda's upcoming medical appointments. When the doctor's office called to reschedule, Jessica claimed scheduling conflicts. "We're just so busy right now. Can we do it next month?" She kept pushing it off, month after month. She kept Matilda home from school. When the school called to ask why Matilda hadn't been in class, Jessica had excuses ready. "She's sick. It's the flu." A week later, "It's bronchitis now. The flu turned into bronchitis." Another week, "The doctor thinks it Might be mono. She needs to rest. Jessica even forged doctor's notes to make it look legitimate. Valencia tried to call for her routine check-in. Jessica didn't answer. Valencia left voicemails. Jessica didn't call back. Finally, Jessica sent a text. We're quarantining. Doctor's orders. Matilda's been really sick. We'll reschedule visit soon. She used the same excuse for weeks. Anything to keep Valencia away from the house. Matilda was completely isolated now. No school, no friends, no visitors, no outside contact at all. She sat in her room day after day, staring at the walls, watching her body change, watching her stomach grow, feeling the thing inside her move. And she had no one to talk to, no one to help her, no way out. Jessica couldn't even look at Matilda anymore. She'd bring food to her room and leave it at the door. She'd knock and walk away. She couldn't face what was happening, couldn't face her own failure, couldn't face the truth about her sons. So she avoided Matilda completely. The twins stayed away from Matilda now, too. They were scared. They knew this was bad. They knew they could get in trouble. So they avoided her room, avoided being alone with her. They went to school and came home and pretended everything was normal. But the fear was there, hanging over all of them. Matilda's emotional state collapsed under the weight of the isolation. She barely ate what food Jessica brought her. She barely spoke. She'd sit in her wheelchair or lie in her bed and just stare at walls for hours. Her mind was blank, empty. She'd gone somewhere else mentally, somewhere where this wasn't happening to her. She was alone in that room, pregnant and terrified, with nowhere to turn and no one to help her. 6 weeks into the cover-up, the foster agency escalated their concerns. Valencia had been documenting every missed appointment, every canceled visit, every excuse Jessica gave. And the agency's policy was clear. Multiple missed appointments triggered an automatic protocol. The child's welfare had to be visually confirmed within a specific time frame. Valencia's supervisor called her into the office. We need visual confirmation of Matilda Wiley's welfare within 48 hours. This isn't optional anymore. Too many red flags. Valencia felt relief and dread at the same time. Relief because she'd been worried about Matilda for months. Dread because she knew this confrontation with Jessica wasn't going to go well. Valencia called Jessica. Her voice was firm. Mrs. Wiley, I'm coming tomorrow at 2 p.m. with a police escort. This isn't optional. We need to see Matilda. Jessica's voice immediately became panicked. Can we do next week? Matilda's still recovering. She's not feeling well. This really isn't a good time. Valencia cut her off. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. If you refuse entry, we're filing an emergency removal order immediately. The supervisor got on the line. Mrs. Wiley, you've canceled multiple appointments and avoided our calls for weeks. We have a legal obligation to ensure this child's safety. We will be there tomorrow at 2 p.m. If you deny us entry, police will be involved. Jessica knew she had no choice. Fine. 2 p.m. She hung up. The next day, Valencia arrived with Officer Trent Reed from the local police department. Officer Reed was in his early 40s. He'd worked with Child Protective Services before. He knew these situations could go bad quickly. Jessica answered the door. She was visibly nervous. Her hands were shaking. This really isn't a good time. Can we reschedule? Officer Reed stepped forward. Ma'am, we're coming in. Please step aside. Jessica had no choice. She opened the door wider and let them in. The twins were at school. The house was quiet. Too quiet. The only sound was coming from down the hallway. From Matilda's room. Valencia walked straight to Matilda's bedroom without waiting for permission. She'd been to this house enough times to know where it was. She opened the door, and what she saw made her stomach drop. Matilda was sitting in her wheelchair. She was visibly pregnant. Her stomach was large and obvious, but worse than that was her physical condition. She was malnourished. Her face was thin. Her eyes were sunken. She looked terrified. The room smelled stale, like it hadn't been aired out in weeks. The curtains were drawn. No natural light coming in. There was an empty water glass beside the bed. The whole room felt like a prison cell. Valencia walked over to Matilda and knelt down beside the wheelchair. "Sweetheart, when was the last time you saw a doctor?" Matilda burst into uncontrollable sobs. She couldn't speak. She just cried. Deep, heartbreaking sobs that came from somewhere deep inside her. Valencia's stomach dropped. This was worse than she'd feared. So much worse. Officer Reed stood in the doorway taking in the scene. He'd seen a lot in his career, but this hit different. Jessica appeared in the doorway trying to do damage control. "She has a boyfriend. From online. I've been trying to handle it privately. I didn't want to make a big deal out of it." Valencia stood up and turned to face Jessica. "She's a minor in state custody. Why didn't you report this immediately? That's your legal obligation." Valencia's voice was hard now. "What boyfriend? What's his name?" Jessica stumbled over her words. I don't know his name. She wouldn't tell me. I've been trying to get her to talk to me, but she won't." Officer Reed stepped into the room. "Ma'am, this isn't adding up. She's been isolated here for weeks. You've been blocking our calls, and now she's pregnant and malnourished?" Valencia turned back to Matilda. "I need to speak with you alone, now." Jessica tried to protest. "I should be there. I'm her mother." Valencia's voice was sharp. "You'll wait outside." Officer Reed escorted Jessica out of the room and closed the door. Valencia declared emergency protective custody right there on the spot. She called for an ambulance to transport Matilda to the hospital. This child needed immediate medical attention. Jessica tried to protest when she heard, "You can't just take her. I'm her mother. You can't do this." Officer Reed blocked her path. "Actually, we can. And we are. Step aside, ma'am." Matilda was removed from the home in an ambulance. Paramedics carefully transferred her from the wheelchair to the stretcher. Valencia rode with her in the ambulance. She held Matilda's hand the whole way. "You're safe now. No one can hurt you anymore. I promise." Matilda couldn't stop crying. Jessica stood in the driveway, watching the ambulance drive away. Neighbors were coming outside to see what was happening. Some of them stared. Some whispered to each other. Jessica knew in that moment that everything was about to unravel. Everything she'd worked so hard to hide was about to come out. And there was nothing she could do to stop it. Matilda was transported to a general hospital. The ambulance pulled up to the emergency entrance. Medical staff were waiting. Valencia had called ahead to explain the situation. They needed the full team ready. Obstetrician, social worker, forensic nurse. This was going to be a long examination. Dr. Juliana Pascal was the obstetrician on call that day. She'd been practicing for 15 years. She'd seen a lot of difficult cases. But when she walked into the examination room and saw Matilda, something about it hit her hard. This girl looked so young, so scared, so broken. The medical team conducted a full examination. Dr. Pascal determined Matilda was approximately 20 weeks pregnant. 5 months. She was severely malnourished, dehydrated. Her vital signs weren't good. But as the examination continued, Dr. Pascal found something worse, much worse. Evidence of prolonged sexual trauma. The injuries were severe, vaginal and cervical tearing. Multiple injuries at different stages of healing. Some of the damage was recent, some was months old. Scar tissue had formed in places where injuries had healed improperly without medical treatment. This wasn't a single assault. This was systematic abuse over a long period of time. Dr. Pascal looked at the forensic nurse, Keturah Willis. Keturah had been doing this work for 10 years. She'd documented hundreds of sexual assault cases. But the expression on her face said this was bad, really bad. "This is systematic abuse," Dr. Pascal said quietly. "Long-term, repeated, violent." Keturah nodded and began photographing everything. Every injury, every scar, every piece of evidence that would be crucial in the criminal case. A rape kit was performed. Samples were collected. DNA evidence that would later prove which twin was the father of the pregnancy. But right now, all that mattered was documenting everything. Making sure the evidence was preserved. Making sure whoever did this couldn't get away with it. After the physical examination, Valencia sat beside Matilda's hospital bed. The room was quiet now, private, safe. Matilda was wrapped in a clean hospital gown and blanket. She looked so small in that bed. "You're safe now," Valencia said gently. "No one can hurt you here. I promise. But I need you to tell me what happened. Can you do that? Can you tell me who did this to you?" Matilda's whole body was trembling. Her voice came out in fragments, broken sentences. It was Jasper and Casper, both of them, for 2 years, since I was 15. She couldn't look at Valencia while she said it. She stared at the blanket, tears running down her face. Valencia was fighting back her own tears. She'd suspected abuse, but hearing it confirmed, hearing that it had gone on for 2 years, 2 full years while Valencia had been visiting that house every other month. It was crushing. "Did Jessica know?" Valencia asked. Matilda nodded. "She heard me crying, at night. She walked past my room. She knew. She didn't stop them." Over the next 2 hours, Matilda disclosed everything. The psychological abuse, how they'd isolated her from everyone, how they'd taken her phone and computer access, the physical abuse, the burns, the bruises, being locked in the closet, and then the sexual assaults, how Casper came first, then Jasper, how it happened over and over for 2 years, how they threatened her. "No one will believe you. Mom loves us more than you." She told Valencia how Jessica heard her crying but never came in, never checked on her, never stopped it. How Jessica saw the bruises and accepted whatever explanation the twins gave. How Jessica canceled all her medical appointments once she got pregnant. How she'd been isolated in that room for weeks. No school, no contact with anyone, just alone with the pregnancy and the fear. Valencia recorded everything, every single detail. She took notes. She documented times and dates as best as Matilda could remember them. This was evidence. All of it. And it was going to be used to make sure those boys and their mother faced justice. Detective Byron Whitfield was called to the hospital immediately. He was a 19-year veteran of the police force. He specialized in crimes against vulnerable persons, children, disabled individuals, elderly victims. He'd built his career on protecting people who couldn't protect themselves. When he got the call about Matilda, he left his desk and drove straight to the hospital. He arrived within an hour. Valencia met him outside Matilda's room and gave him a summary. His jaw clenched as he listened. "How did this go on for 2 years?" he asked. It wasn't really a question that expected an answer. It was just disbelief. Anger. Valencia just shook her head. "I missed it. I should have seen it." Detective Whitfield went into the room. He introduced himself to Matilda. His voice was gentle, kind. "Matilda, I'm Detective Whitfield. I know you've already told Ms. Brooks what happened, but I need to hear it from you too. Can you tell me, in your own words?" Matilda went through it again. It was harder this time, more exhausting. But she told him everything. Detective Whitfield listened carefully, asked gentle questions when he needed clarification, never pushed too hard. When she was done, he looked her in the eye. "You're very brave for telling us this. I know it wasn't easy, but I promise you, we're going to make sure they can't hurt you again. We're going to make sure they face consequences for what they did." Detective Whitfield left the hospital and drove straight back to the station. He had work to do. He filed for immediate arrest warrants for Jasper and Casper Wiley, multiple counts of rape, sexual battery, assault of a dependent person. For Jessica Wiley, child endangerment, obstruction of justice, accessory to rape, neglect of a dependent resulting in harm. He took the warrant applications to a judge. The judge read through the medical reports, read Matilda's statement, looked at the photographs. The judge signed the warrants within 3 hours. "Bring them in," the judge said. Detective Whitfield nodded. It was time to make the arrests. The next morning, Detective Whitfield and 2 uniformed officers pulled up at the twins' school. It was 3rd period. The twins were in class. They had no idea what was coming. The principal met the officers at the front office. Detective Whitfield explained the situation. The principal's face went pale. "Oh my God," was all she could say. The principal escorted the officers to Jasper's classroom first. She knocked on the door. The teacher came to the doorway. The principal whispered something. The teacher nodded and turned back to the class. "Jasper Wiley, please come to the door." Jasper looked confused. He got up and walked to the front of the room. When he stepped into the hallway, he saw the police officers. His face changed. "Jasper Wiley, you're under arrest for rape and sexual assault." Detective Whitfield's voice was clear and firm. The handcuffs were on Jasper before he could react. "What? This is insane. I didn't do anything." His voice was loud. Students in the classroom could hear through the door. The teacher was trying to keep them seated. They did the same thing with Casper. Pulled him from his classroom. Read him his rights. Put the handcuffs on while he yelled that it was all a lie. Students in the hallways pulled out their phones. They recorded everything. Videos of the twins being walked out in handcuffs. Within hours, those videos were all over social media. Local news picked it up. Headlines started appearing. Twin brothers arrested for raping disabled foster sister. In the police car on the way to the station, the twins' shock started turning into rage. Casper was in the back of one car yelling at the officers. "This is bullshit. She's lying. She wanted it. She asked for it." The officer driving didn't respond. Just kept his eyes on the road. Finally, he said, "She's disabled and dependent on you for her basic care. That's rape. You understand that, right? Even if she said yes, which she didn't, she can't legally consent to you. That's the law." Jasper was quieter in the other car. He sat in the back seat staring out the window. Finally, he spoke. "Mom's gonna fix this. She'll get us out." The officer glanced at him in the rearview mirror. "Your mom's being arrested too." Jasper went completely silent after that. Detective Whitfield arrived at Jessica's home with a female officer. Jessica answered the door. She'd been expecting this. She knew it was coming. "Jessica Wiley, you're under arrest." He read her the charges: child endangerment, obstruction of justice, accessory after the fact to rape, neglect of a dependent person resulting in harm. Jessica didn't resist. She just stood there, resigned, like she'd already given up. The officer put the handcuffs on. Jessica was led out to the police car. Neighbors were everywhere now. Some were standing in their yards watching. Others had come out onto the street. A former friend of Jessica's was standing across the street. She yelled, "How could you let this happen? She was just a child." Jessica didn't look at her. She kept her eyes on the ground as she was put into the back of the police car. At the station, all three were placed in separate interrogation rooms. Detective Whitfield started with Jasper. He sat across from the teenage boy and laid out the evidence. "We have medical evidence. Matilda has severe vaginal and cervical tearing, multiple injuries at different stages of healing, evidence of repeated assault. We have her recorded statement naming you and your brother. We have DNA samples. This isn't he said, she said. This is facts." Jasper initially denied everything. "She's making it up. She's always been dramatic. She wanted attention." Detective Whitfield remained calm. "The medical evidence doesn't lie, Jasper. Her injuries are real. They're documented. They're photographed. So let's try again." Jasper's story started changing. "Okay, maybe something happened once. But she wanted it. She was lonely. We felt bad for her." Detective Whitfield leaned forward. "She's your disabled foster sister who depends on you for everything. She can't walk. She can't escape. She can't fight back. And you're telling me she wanted it? That's rape, Jasper. That's what rape is." Jasper realized he was making it worse. He stopped talking and asked for a lawyer. The interrogation ended. Casper's interrogation went differently. He was more aggressive, more belligerent. "She trapped us. She knew what she was doing. She was always around. She made us feel sorry for her." Detective Whitfield stared at him. "She's in a wheelchair. She literally cannot go anywhere without help. How exactly did she trap you?" Casper stumbled. She was always there, in the house. We couldn't get away from her. Detective Whitfield's voice was hard now. So you raped her because you felt sorry for her? Because she was always there? Is that really the defense you want to go with? Casper realized how bad he sounded. He shut down. Requested a lawyer. Jessica's interrogation was last. She tried to deflect, minimize, blame. I didn't know it was happening. I work long hours. I'm not home all the time. How was I supposed to know? Detective Whitfield pulled out his notes. Matilda says you heard her crying. Multiple times. She says you walked past her room in the middle of the night and heard her sobbing. She says you knew. Jessica's voice cracked. I thought she was just upset. Teenagers are emotional. I didn't think... Detective Whitfield cut her off. She was pregnant. You knew she was pregnant. And you hid it. You canceled her medical appointments. You kept her home from school. You blocked the caseworker's calls. Why did you do all that if you didn't know what was happening? Jessica was silent for a long time. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, she said, I didn't want to lose my boys. Detective Whitfield leaned back in his chair. So you sacrificed your daughter instead. Jessica's face crumpled. She wasn't my daughter. She was my foster child. The words hung in the air. Detective Whitfield looked at her with disgust. She was a child in your care. A child who depended on you for protection, and you fed her to wolves. Jessica requested a lawyer. The interview was over. Back at the hospital, doctors worked to stabilize Matilda. But she remained in critical emotional and physical distress. The pregnancy complicated everything. Her body was malnourished, dehydrated, weak from years of immobility and months of not eating properly. Dr. Juliana Pascal consulted with the medical ethics team. Her body is not equipped to safely carry this pregnancy. Her existing spinal injury creates additional risks, and the internal infections from the untreated injuries are spreading. The medical ethics team convened to discuss options. Terminate the pregnancy? Try to continue it under intensive monitoring? It was an impossible situation. Matilda was 17 years old. She was being asked to make a decision no one should ever have to make. Especially not a child who'd already endured so much. Dr. Pascal sat with Matilda and explained the options as gently as she could. Matilda could barely speak through her tears. I don't want it. Please. I don't want it. Get it out of me. Please. The desperation in her voice broke everyone's heart. The medical team agreed. Medical termination was necessary on grounds of severe psychological distress and medical risk to the patient. The procedure was scheduled for the following day. The medical termination was performed under sedation. Matilda was put under. She wouldn't feel anything. Wouldn't remember it. That was the only mercy anyone could offer her. But during the procedure, doctors discovered the full extent of the internal damage. It was worse than they'd thought. Severe vaginal and cervical tearing. Some of the injuries were so old they'd developed scar tissue. Others were more recent and still healing. There was evidence of internal bleeding that had never been treated. Infections in multiple areas. Dr. Pascal spoke quietly to the surgical team. This is evidence of prolonged violent assault. This poor child. This poor, poor child. Forensic nurse Keturah Willis photographed and documented everything. Every injury. Every scar. This evidence would be crucial in the criminal prosecution. It would prove beyond any doubt what had been done to Matilda. It would make it impossible for the twins or their mother to claim it was consensual or exaggerated. After the procedure, Matilda was moved to recovery. She should have woken up normally, but she didn't. Her vitals started destabilizing. Her blood pressure dropped dangerously low. Her temperature spiked. The monitors started beeping. Nurses rushed in. Code was called. Matilda was rushed to the ICU. Sepsis. Blood poisoning from the untreated internal infections. The infections had been festering for months, maybe years, and now they were overwhelming her system. Her body was shutting down. The ICU team worked through the night. Antibiotics, fluids, ventilator support. everything they could do to fight the infection and keep her alive. But the infections were too advanced. The damage was too severe. Matilda's body had endured too much for too long. Years of immobility, malnutrition, trauma. Her organs were failing one by one. The doctors did everything medically possible. But sometimes the body just gives up. Sometimes it's been through too much and it can't fight anymore. At 3:42 a.m., Matilda coded. Her heart stopped. The medical team rushed in. Chest compressions, medications, defibrillator. They fought for 47 minutes, trying everything, trying to bring her back. Nurse Livette Monroe held Matilda's hand the entire time. She'd been Matilda's nurse since she arrived at the hospital. She'd sat with her, talked to her, tried to make her feel safe. For one brief moment, Matilda opened her eyes. Just for a second. Livette squeezed her hand. "You're going to be okay, sweetie. We're here. We're fighting for you." Matilda's lips moved. Livette leaned in close to hear. The words were barely a whisper. "I just wanted a family." Those were her final words. Her eyes closed, and she was gone. At 4:29 a.m., time of death was declared. Cause: septic shock, multiple organ failure, complications from prolonged sexual assault and medical neglect. Matilda Wiley was dead. She was 17 years old. Detective Whitfield was notified at 5 a.m. He'd been working at his desk all night, building the case, filing paperwork. When his phone rang and he heard the news, it hit him like a physical blow. He'd been doing this job for 19 years. He'd seen a lot of terrible things, but this one was different. This one hurt. Valencia Brooks was notified next. She broke down completely when she heard. She blamed herself. She should have seen it. She should have pushed harder. She should have saved her. The guilt was crushing. She went to the hospital and sat in the chapel and cried for an hour. Jessica was notified in her cell at the jail. An officer came in and told her. Jessica showed no visible emotion. She just stared at the wall. The officer waited for a reaction. Tears, anger, something. But Jessica just sat there, empty. The twins were notified separately. Jasper cried when he heard. Real tears. He broke down. Casper remained stone-faced. He didn't cry, didn't react. He just sat there. The officer watching him couldn't tell if he was in shock or if he just didn't care. The charges against all three of them would now include felony murder provisions. A death occurred during the commission of their felonies. That changed everything. The local media got the story first. Foster teen dies after alleged years of abuse by twin brothers. Within 24 hours, the story went national. It was on cable news. Social media exploded. True crime forums picked it up. Everyone was talking about it. The hashtag Justice for Matilda started trending worldwide. People were outraged, heartbroken, demanding answers. Matilda's photo was everywhere. The one from before the wheelchair, where she was smiling, dancing, full of life. People saw that photo and saw a girl who should have had a future, who should have had a chance, who deserved so much better than what she got. Neighbor Darlene Foster lived 3 houses down from the Wileys. She'd lived there for 20 years. A news crew came to interview her. She stood on her porch crying. I heard crying sometimes, late at night, through the walls when I'd have my windows open in the summer. But Jessica always said Matilda was just sensitive, that she got emotional because of her disability. I believed her. I should have called someone. I should have done something. But I believed her. Another neighbor, Curtis Womack, gave a similar interview. I saw the boys being rough with her wheelchair a few times, pushing her too fast, being careless. But I thought it was just brothers being brothers. You know, rough play. Teenage boys don't always think about being gentle. I didn't think it was serious. I didn't think... He trailed off. He couldn't finish the sentence. The guilt was written all over his face. This guilt was spreading through the entire community. Everyone who'd ever seen something. Everyone who'd ever wondered. Everyone who'd believed Jessica's explanations instead of trusting their instincts. They all felt responsible. They all felt like they'd failed Matilda. The school held a press conference. Principal Hugh Davenport stood at a podium in front of reporters. We had concerns about Matilda. Multiple staff members reported those concerns. We followed protocol. We reported to the appropriate agencies. We did everything we were supposed to do. A reporter interrupted him. But she's dead. So clearly the protocol failed. Clearly doing what you were supposed to do wasn't enough. Principal Davenport had no answer for that. He stood there silent for a moment. Then he walked away from the podium. The press conference ended. Teachers from the school started coming forward anonymously. We were told not to press too hard. The family seemed fine on the surface. The mother was involved in school events. How were we supposed to know what was happening behind closed doors? The foster agency announced an internal investigation. They placed Valencia Brooks on administrative leave pending the review. This was devastating for Valencia because she'd been the one who finally intervened. She'd been the one who saved Matilda, even though it turned out to be too late. But the agency needed someone to blame, and she was an easy target. Advocacy groups descended on the foster agency. Protesters stood outside with signs. How many children are suffering right now? Matilda's blood is on your hands. Fix the system before another child dies. The calls for reform were loud and getting louder. Policy overhaul, more oversight, better training, actual consequences for failure. Online, the outrage was even more intense. Social media was filled with people demanding justice. The true crime community was all over it. YouTube videos, podcasts, TikToks. Everyone was covering Matilda's story. Petitions were started. Maximum sentence for Jessica, Jasper, and Casper Wiley. Hundreds of thousands of signatures within days. The case had become a rallying cry for change, for justice, for remembering the victims who fall through the cracks. Lead prosecutor Destiny McCrae was assigned to the case. She'd been prosecuting for 12 years. She specialized in sex crimes and cases involving vulnerable victims. When she read Matilda's file, she made a promise to herself. She was going to make sure these people faced the maximum consequences. No plea deals, no reduced charges, full accountability. Detective Whitfield partnered with her to build an airtight case. They worked around the clock. They knew the media attention meant there was no room for error. Every piece of evidence had to be documented perfectly. Every witness statement had to be recorded properly. This case had to be bulletproof. The evidence they collected was damning. Medical records documenting every injury, showing the timeline of abuse. Matilda's recorded testimony from the hospital, given before she died. That testimony was legally admissible. Forensic photographs from the examination. DNA evidence from the terminated pregnancy. The paternity test came back. Jasper was the biological father. But evidence showed Casper had assaulted Matilda multiple times too. Both were equally guilty. Text messages between the twins were recovered from their phones. Messages discussing Matilda in degrading, objectifying terms. She's so annoying. Can't wait until we don't have to deal with her anymore. Digital forensics found deleted photos and videos on Jasper's phone. They were working on recovering those files. Every piece of evidence painted the same picture. Predators who exploited a powerless victim. Witness interviews added to the case. School nurse Mrs. Deshawn Hartley gave a statement about her concerns. Teacher Ms. Rhonda Clement documented how Matilda had changed over time. Neighbors who'd heard crying gave statements. Valencia Brooks provided detailed case history. Everything showed a pattern of missed opportunities and ignored warning signs. The court ordered psychological evaluations of the twins. Dr. Willa Brennan, a forensic psychologist, conducted extensive interviews. Her findings were clear. Both boys exhibit narcissistic traits, lack of empathy, and entitlement behaviors. This is consistent with being raised without accountability or consequences. But critically, they understood right from wrong. They knew what they were doing was wrong. They just didn't care. Jessica's role was examined closely. The investigation revealed her pattern of enabling behavior. The school incident where she'd defended her sons against clear evidence. Her history of refusing recommended interventions. Evidence that she'd heard the abuse and done nothing. The canceled medical appointments, the blocked calls to the caseworker. Prosecutor McRae's conclusion was simple. She wasn't just negligent. She was complicit. Defense attorney Montgomery Shaw took the twins' case. He was known for defending controversial clients. He was media savvy and knew how to work public opinion. He held a press conference outside the courthouse. These are juveniles who made terrible mistakes, but we must remember they're products of their environment. They're victims of poor parenting themselves. His strategy was to shift all the blame to Jessica. Jessica Wiley created an environment where boundaries were never taught. She never held them accountable for anything. She never taught them right from wrong. These boys are as much victims as anyone else. The public reaction was immediate outrage. They're calling rapists and murderers victims? Jessica's lawyer was a public defender named Randall Foster. He was overworked and underpaid. His argument was weak. She didn't know the full extent of what was happening. She worked long hours. She trusted her sons. She missed the signs. Prosecutor McRae's rebuttal was devastating. She knew enough. She heard the crying. She saw the bruises. She hid the pregnancy. She chose her sons over her daughter. That's not missing signs. That's making a choice. The defense tried to humanize the twins in the media. They released childhood photos, smiling boys in baseball uniforms, birthday parties. They were good kids who went down the wrong path. The prosecution countered with photos of Matilda, before the wheelchair, dancing and laughing. After the adoption, thin and haunted. Public sentiment was firmly against the defense. No amount of PR could change what the twins had done. The courtroom was packed for the trial. Because the twins were juveniles, it was juvenile court. But given the severity, the proceedings were open to the public. Media filled the back rows. Advocates wore purple ribbons with Matilda's name. Former foster families sat crying. The twins sat expressionless, flanked by their lawyers. Prosecutor Destiny McRae's opening statement was devastating. Matilda Wiley was trapped, not just by her wheelchair, but by the cruelty of the two people who caused her to need that wheelchair in the first place. For 2 years, she endured torture, and her mother heard her crying and did nothing. Several jury members wiped tears. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence. Medical examiner testimony. Dr. Pascal describing the internal injuries. Forensic nurse showing photographs. Matilda's recorded statement played in court. Her voice trembling, crying, telling her story. The courtroom was silent. Text messages between the twins shown on screens. Their degrading language about Matilda on full display. The defense called character witnesses. Teachers said the boys were polite students. Family members said they were loving. Montgomery Shaw argued they were products of Jessica's failed parenting. The jury looked disgusted. The public gallery murmured. The judge threatened to clear the room. Jessica's trial was concurrent in adult court. She made the catastrophic decision to take the stand. Under cross-examination, she fell apart. Prosecutor McRae asked, "You knew they were rough with her?" Jessica, "Yes, but I didn't think it was that bad." McRae, "She was pregnant and you hid it. Why?" Jessica crying, "I didn't want to lose my boys." McRae, "So you chose them over her, the girl whose life your sons destroyed?" Jessica had no answer. The verdicts came after 3 days of deliberation. Both twins, guilty on all counts: rape, sexual battery, assault, felony murder. The courtroom erupted in applause. The judge allowed it. Jessica's verdict came the same day. Guilty on all charges. More applause. Judge Arletta Voss delivered the sentences. To the twins, "You exploited someone who couldn't escape. You violated her in every way possible, and when she needed help, you let her die." Sentence: maximum juvenile detention until age 25, then transfer to adult prison. Total potential 20 years each. Sex offender registration for life. To Jessica, "You heard her crying and walked away." Sentence: 15 years. Eligible for parole after 10. Matilda was buried in a small ceremony. Her grandmother attended, crying for the baby she'd given up trying to protect. The headstone read, "Matilda, beloved, you deserved a family who loved you." Matilda's case forced a national conversation about vulnerable victims. How many people heard Matilda crying and did nothing? The school nurse, teachers, neighbors, caseworkers. They all had pieces of the puzzle. But Jessica's confidence convinced them they were wrong. A psychologist explained, "Abusers are often charming and convincing. That's how they maintain control." Statistics showed disabled individuals are 3 times more likely to be abused and less likely to be believed when they disclose. Matilda's story wasn't rare, it was just rarely reported. Multiple systems failed her. Foster care approved an unfit family. Schools noticed signs but didn't push hard enough. The medical system trusted the parent over the patient. Legal system had no consequences until it was too late. Matilda wanted a family, safety, love, protection. Instead, she got a mother who valued reputation over a child's life, brothers who saw her as an object, a system that heard her suffering but didn't listen. Her death was preventable at multiple points. If agencies had heeded concerns, if schools had acted more forcefully, if neighbors had trusted their instincts. But belief is a powerful weapon, and Jessica wielded it perfectly. Silence is not kindness. Believing the wrong person can destroy a life forever. Better to ask an uncomfortable question than attend a funeral. Matilda Wiley was born into trauma and died from it. She survived the rape that created her, but couldn't survive the rape that destroyed her. She wanted nothing more than to be loved. She deserved everything the world failed to give her. Matilda's story didn't have to end this way, but it did. How many more stories like hers are unfolding right now? Behind closed doors in homes that look perfect from the outside, thousands of vulnerable children suffer in silence annually. Too often, people who could save them choose to believe the wrong voice. If this story affected you, don't let that feeling fade. Awareness without action is just entertainment. This was a real child's real suffering and death. Subscribe to this channel to stay informed on cases demanding justice. Share Matilda's story. The more people who know, the more lives we can protect. Comment below. What warning sign was missed? What should have been done differently? If you or someone you know is in a situation like Matilda's, speak up. Tell a teacher, neighbor, doctor, anyone who will listen. Your voice could save a life. Matilda Wiley's voice was silenced. But ours doesn't have to be. Let's make sure no one else suffers in silence. Thank you for watching.